The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Along with Dan Rylance, my regular co-host, and we're very pleased to be joined this evening on this edition by Miles McGuire from the Oshkosh Community News Network. Most of you, I think, are familiar with Miles, and we're pleased that he could be here tonight to join us for kind of a special end of the year, holiday season, just kind of a fun-filled show. Right, Dan?
Absolutely. This is kind of my idea, and if it gets corny, blame me as we go along. But as a print journalist, I always liked on my last column of the year to kind of go look back at the previous year, and so that's what we're going to do tonight. I would argue that looking back at 2007 gives all of us an opportunity to kind of sharpen our memory a little bit, pull out single or multiple events as we move forward to another year. There's no magic in these categories, and we may select more as we proceed. And I should warn our viewers, as both of you, that humor is a needed companion for this program. We all need to laugh at ourselves, and hopefully at some of our winners tonight. So with that, I just have a list of categories, and I'm just going to, and we'll kind of rotate who's going to ask them, but the first category I'd like you people to respond to is, what do you think was the top news story in Oshkosh in the year 2007?
Ooh. I think we had a number.
Okay. Well, we could say top news stories.
Yes. I think that the 100 block failure and foreclosure was definitely a biggie. Okay. Certainly everything that happened with respect to the city manager and the city attorney, I think that those were some biggies. Those are the ones that immediately came to my mind when I heard the category.
Okay, and I think those are certainly big stories. The thing that I focused on, however, is a little bit off the wall, I guess.
Good.
And that is crime. Because I think there has been an enormous amount of crime in the city over the last year. You know, there was a big street fight early in the year, murder-suicide. There's been a string of these convenience store robberies. Reports of a much greater volume of illegal drug trafficking going on, sexual assaults in the vicinity of the campus. And I think that that's an important story because this is a community that has always been safe, has prided itself on safety, and also because the solutions are not easy. I mean, these are not problems that you're going to solve by putting more cops on the street. That might help, but there are deeper economic and social issues that need to be discussed.
I think that's really good, and it's sort of interesting because the new police chief plan is this community policing, and those are going to be hard to solve.
Yes.
And so he's really put himself and his new leadership that he wants to get into. And these are really kind of these community low-key type things, so it'll be a real challenge for him, I think. Yeah.
Well,
my top news stories are kind of like yours. I have it more specifically. I just have changes in City Hall. And, you know, maybe this is erroneous, but who would imagine at the beginning of 2007 that the city manager, the city attorney, would be gone, and that the city budget director and the city transportation director would have announced their retirements. That's 4 key positions. And then you throw in the one we knew about, which is the retirement of Police Chief David Erickson. You have 5 major changes in City Hall. And I think, you know, replacements for City Hall will continue to be a story in 2008 because we're just beginning the process.
Sure.
So that would be where I would be at.
All right. One of the next ones was top newsmaker or makers for 2007, and you know this again. It kind of goes along with the top news story or news stories, but trying to find something a little bit different, I think one of the major news stories of this past year was, Supreme Court Justice Annette Ziegler. She had been accused prior to winning that post that she was probably not in the best position to be, running when she had overseen cases that
Many
involved
cases.
her. Yeah, there were 24 cases since 2004 that involved West Bend Savings Bank, which her husband sits on the board of directors there, and yet she continued to oversee and hear those cases. And that, I believe, is under investigation right now.
It is.
So I thought that was kind of a big story that she would actually, that the voters in this state would actually sort of just kind of close their eyes to that and elect her anyway.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how stringent fellow court judges are and whether they slap her hands a little or big, because
or a lot, yeah.
or a lot, because we kind of think that the Supreme Court is sort of above that sort of thing, and also the campaign was very expensive, first time in a long time. So there's some issues there.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I would go back though to the city and look at the new composition of the council. Certainly, a lot of things have changed. The question, though, that I have in mind is whether they're new developments, but is it truly a new trend, or is it kind of more of the same, which is, in my view, a not very strong or successful body sort of muddling through. One of the criticisms of the old councils was that it was this old boys network. Well, if you look at the council, it's still mostly old boys. It's a different old boys group, but is it still going to do more of the same? And I think that with the where we are on the search for a new city manager, delayed, and I think a lot of confusion about where that's going to work out. I don't know that we're going to get to a better solution, but maybe we will. But in any case, I think there's something Frank Tower and Tony Palmieri have sort of changed the dynamics.
Yeah. Well, and on the subject of that, just kind of a side note, you're kind of opposed to using a professional search firm for this process, aren't you?
Well, I am, to the extent that I have real doubts about where this is going to go. And I think it goes back to sort of the character of the city, which is, if you wanted to sum it up, is that we want the most for the least. We don't want to pay very much. So I think that we may end up, as we did 10 years ago, where they got rid of Bill Free, but there's somebody here that we'll just sort of put in, and I'm afraid that even if you do hire a professional search firm, the kind of money that the job is likely to command, as well as the divisions within the city. I mean, you're really looking for somebody who's going to come in here and really walk into, a buzzsaw. And to do that for $110,000, $120,000, I'm not optimistic that you're going to get that person.
Yeah.
I think it remains to be seen. I read your blog on that also, and I called someone from UWO before the show, and I said, now, if Chancellor Wells were to leave, would UWO hire a firm to find a new chancellor? And this person said absolutely yes, that it's too important of a position for local staff, and I'm sure faculty and staff would be in uproar over that. But I thought that was an interesting comment, because I assumed that the new chancellor, if there were, and I'm not saying there isn't going to be one, but that they would be in charge of the process. And he kind of indicated, oh heck no, we would go with a headhunter as well.
Well, I think at that level there's a headhunter, but there is also a campus search committee that that actually I think may make the official recommendation. So
my experience on university search committees is that the search committee never picks the person. You can't rank them. And it's someone over in Dempsey or whatever college you're at. And so faculty are sort of, I think, misused on search committees. They do all the legwork, but in the end, at the departmental level, they probably do. But when you get up higher levels, I don't think they make the decisions.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see if, because there is buzz in the community right now about the fact that Steve Hentz and Bill Free's search firm, what's the name of it?
I don't know.
I don't know either. The name is escaping me right now, but they've been around for a number of
H&F.
years. And you know, there are rumblings in the community that they're just automatically going to get the nod that this, you know, bid letting process is just, you know, the request for proposals is just sort of a formality. And I'm not getting that sense. I don't think that it's a sure thing that they're going to get the contract on that.
I sensed from my interview with John Fitzpatrick that he wanted to go broader, that, you know, he wanted to look at good candidates and good search firms that are broader than the boundaries of Wisconsin.
I kind of got that feeling just from seeing the last discussion
Yeah.
that the council had about this too, that, you know, they're thinking maybe looking outside of our backyard a little
Right.
bit may be the best thing for us. You know, I mean, there's something to be said for knowing the lay of the land, which certainly, you know, Mr. Free and Mr. Hentz do, but there's also something to be said about, you know, getting someone from outside of the community who can maybe think outside the box a little bit and not just be mired in the same problems and the same circle of people that we've been mired in for so long.
That'll really test Miles' idea that the old boys really don't want major change. So, you know, if you bring in too powerful of a
Right.
city manager, they may say, you know, we don't want that.
Yeah,
Well, that's what happened to Bill Free, right?
Yeah, yeah, I don't want that.
yeah, so it'll be interesting.
I had a newsmaker. I had two. I had the city manager, Jack Walnick, and I had Chancellor Richard Wells. I think the changes in the campus, I think he's been a major newsmaker in the past year. I mean, I've lived here 11 years, and there's more physical changes on that campus since he's been here, and they continue with a $48 million classroom building. You know, they need to raise some money on their own, but
A lot of money.
yeah, but they're getting $40 million from the state, which is
Well, they're only getting it if they raise the
Well,
money
that's true.
first.
That's true.
But I agree with you. I
Yeah.
think that he has, you know, and in some ways he may be a model of the kind of person that the city wants, but he would be taking a serious cut in pay
Yeah, no,
to be city manager. And but I think if the city were to say, wait a second, you know, we're going to pay somebody $150,000, $160,000. I don't know what his salary is at the moment. We're going to provide a housing allowance. We're going to provide a car. We're going to provide all of these other benefits. Then you're in a different league, and you may get somebody. But I think that that's the caliber of person, as well as the approach that he's taken. I disagree with him on a lot of things, and I don't think that he nearly puts as much energy and emphasis on the core mission of university, which should be sort of
the academic side.
intellectual. But you know, these other things are important too, and certainly he has done a lot of good things.
Yeah, yeah.
Major accomplishments in 2007. You know, this was a tough one.
Was it?
Yeah, this was one that you had kind of tossed out there, and
Yeah,
you
I
know,
did.
I'm still kind of struggling to come up with a major accomplishment. You know, we have gotten we got Five Rivers kind of out of the picture and Access Acquisition Group in the picture, and yet, even though they've been very open with the public and coming before the council a number of times, we still haven't seen the first shovel of dirt turned down there, and we're not sure when we're going to. So, you know, is that accomplishment? Is that an accomplishment that we've made? I don't know. You know, I'm really struggling to find a major accomplishment that we achieved in 07.
Miles is going to have two or three.
Yeah, I do have a
Yeah.
couple, and actually one that piggybacks on what you just said with Chancellor Wells.
Yeah.
I mean, the university did open two new structures. The one's a parking garage. That's not too exciting, but
Well, it is for the
At
people
least you
parking
can
there.
park.
but the wellness center, which I think is important for a couple of reasons. One is that it shows very clearly the potential of the city's waterfront, and there just has been the movement on redeveloping the waterfront has been so excruciatingly slow and sometimes going backwards more than forwards. And you know, that's there, and it's a distinctive, you know, from the water or from the street. You know, it's a distinctive piece of architecture. It's drawing students down to that part of the campus. You know, in a lot of ways, I think that both of those are remarkable. I have another one, but I'll let
Do
you
it. No,
throw one.
go. Well, I'll go. All right. I think the completed renovation promise for the old Mercy Hospital, now called Buena Vista, it got off of 4 or 5 years of nothing. They now promise that complex will be completed in October of 2008. I mean, that's certainly more than what they've done for the last 4 years, which is nothing. I think the major redesign of the Northwestern is important for the community because it is such a major change in what we've been used to in a daily newspaper. I'm not enamored with lots of the changes, but clearly the access, the forms, the community columnists, the emphasis on local personalities in sports at the high school level, these are major changes for this community, and I think they certainly have done that.
Yeah.
Well, and they had to do that. You know, if they, and we've talked about this when you've been on before, we've talked about it with Stu Rickman and Alex Hummel, who, for the audience's benefit, will be joining us on next week's program. You know, they had to do that in order to, like any newspaper, compete in today's cyber world.
Yeah. Although today was the day that the Tribune Company's sale was sold, and Sam Zell, real estate developer, comes in. He's now the CEO of Tribune, and he is already saying, you know, and this is true, newspapers are among the worst managed organizations on the face of the earth. And he says, I don't know anything about newspapers, but I've made a ton of money, and I've worked in real estate, I've worked in all these different fields, and I think I can look at these things clearly and differently and say there are different ways of doing things. So I think that what the Northwestern has done is commendable in some ways, but what we're also seeing is that there is a reduction in reporting resources, professional reporting resources in the community, and I think the community suffers from that.
Yeah.
And I think that it's, you know, it's one of the things that Zell is talking about is, you know, Tribune, like Gannett, is a big newspaper chain, and he's saying, well, you know, maybe it's a mistake to run this with one vision of how to do a newspaper. Maybe it's better to either spin off the newspapers individually, or certainly let them do what they want to do rather than to say this is the way to do it. You know, what the Northwestern did here is what Gannett decreed its local newspapers would do. I mean, you know, with some minor adjustments here and there. So I'm hopeful that maybe Zell will show that there's a way to reinvigorate newspapers that isn't just cutting.
He's firing top managers almost instantly, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And going into the business community, not the journalism professor to replace him.
Right.
Who knows?
I had one accomplishment, and I don't know that it's really major or not, but I think the fact that despite all the change and the upheaval at City Hall, the city has continued running. You know, our streets are getting plowed, our garbage is being picked up without a fee being instituted to do so. And, you know, the tax bills, whether we like it or not, they got out on time. The budget was approved. I mean, things have continued moving forward, despite just, like I said, a tremendous amount of upheaval, stress, tension, what have you, during the course of the last several months. And I think no matter what anyone feels about former city manager Dick Wolink, part of that credit has to go to him because he did lay a certain foundation for the way things moved at City Hall. I certainly didn't always like his style or the way things happened under his leadership, or as some would say, a lack of leadership, but nonetheless, there was some groundwork that had been laid.
I think that's a good point.
And I think part of the credit also has to go to a really good city staff. I think by and large, despite some problems in a few areas, by and large, we are very blessed to have the type of employees in the city of Oshkosh that we do. So.
Yeah, I think that's true. The other accomplishment that I have is something that I don't think pay a lot of attention to, and that is, but we should, I guess, one aspect of our local business community. You know, Oshkosh Truck a couple of weeks ago reported, I think its fiscal year results, and profits are up 30%. And so, you know, that's remarkable. I mean, that's a real achievement. I think it's interesting to think about Oshkosh Truck in part because we don't see them. I mean, I don't see them. You know, in other cities where I've worked, the CEO or the executive vice presidents of the Fortune 500 companies were very involved in civic affairs, and you know, and maybe behind the scenes, maybe they're just very quiet, but I don't think that's the case. I mean, we just don't see them. Their management expertise, and what I'm not saying is that, oh, here's a private sector company, we need to adopt private sector approaches to things, because if you think about Oshkosh Truck, It makes its money because of government. You know, it makes its money as a defense contractor. Its fire engines, you know, were sold to cities or airports or whatever. And even the cement trucks, you know, are dependent to a large degree on government road building and bridge building and those kinds of things. But whatever they're doing something right. And so there's got to be some smart, energetic people over there down on 20th Street, and maybe there could be a way to kind of rope them more centrally into the community.
You know, the only thing I can think of, I think they made a major donation to the Boys and Girls Club in the past year. I'm not sure the amount, but you're right. They're not as visible as you might think. As the leading probably company in Oshkosh. Yeah.
Major disappointments.
Yeah.
How
many pages do you have?
Well, go ahead, Dan. Why don't you start?
Well, I have sort of a generic one, and then I have 3 pages. No, I don't have that many. I have the failure of just economic development in the city of Oshkosh as a generic category. And then you already mentioned the 100 block, but you know, Pioneer Inn is rotting 3 or 4 years now. The delay in access, which you meant, the failure of Five Rivers. I think we should talk a little bit about why is that happening. But clearly, you know, the vision for the last 3 or 4 years in economic development in Oshkosh has just not happened. So that'd be one of my major disappointments.
Well, I'm disappointed with the school district, as I think a lot of people are.
Right.
You know, we have spent not just 9 or 10 years, but we have spent the better majority of the last year and a half, again, mired in studies and proposals and Lord knows what, and all these different scenarios that they have come up with. Every time they come up with something, some sector of the public comes back and just beats their brains out. And where are we? You know, 1 week away before the end of the year, the same place we were before.
Right.
Probably more so, you know, backwards than forward, or even in neutral. I think we've moved backwards because now, I mean, when we started this process, there may have been some hope for a referendum passing. Now, I don't think there's that hope for a referendum passing, no matter what plan they would come up with. So I think we've probably stepped backward in time than move forward or even stand still. And that is a huge disappointment.
I think Rickman may have said it best. He said a couple of weeks ago, the best thing this group could do now is to turn in their resignations before they do irreparable damage to the district. A lot of people think, you know.
But hasn't that damage already been done in some respects?
Oh, it has, of
you
course.
know, I mean,
Yeah.
and let's face it, I mean, I'm sure he said that tongue in cheek, although there probably was some seriousness to it too. But, you know, I mean, we can't just get all their resignations. I mean,
No, of course not.
you know, even if you recalled them, you'd have to put up other candidates to run against them. And, you know, we can't even find candites to
That's
run
right.
for city council or
That's
school
right.
board as it is. So, you know.
But I agree
tongue-in-cheek
with you. I
about
think
it.
the school district and the administration, this has been an awful year. I mean, and I think a lot of people are frustrated. And I don't know any winners in this past year on what they've done or not done.
Yeah. Is there a common theme though here with economic development not happening and school redistricting not happening? Is it?
I do, and I think it's leadership.
Yeah.
I really do. But I think economic development is a harder, you know, I was checking on REITs on office business space in 2007. It's down 20% nationally. You know, we're in a kind of a transition period from some good economic years, and I think office buildings are tough to sell. So I think leadership is more evident, lack of leadership more evident at school district level. But certainly I think, you know, do we really have a visionary? You know, we really have a schmoozer who's going around, and you know, who is responsible, you know, for economic development? And I think leadership is a problem there too.
When you say leadership, though, Dan, are you referring to leadership in the administration office with Dr. Heilman, for example? Are you talking about leadership at the school board level, or is it a combination of both?
No,
that
I
you're
think it's
looking at?
both.
Okay.
Yeah, I was told that Dr. Heilman could redistrict or reestablish boundaries without even the approval of,
I believe
of
that's
the
true.
school board.
I
You know,
believe
he'd
that's
probably be
true.
out of a job, but we'd have that taken care of.
But I think that's the same problem, and actually that's, I think, what caught up with Dick Wolank eventually was, you know, it's sort of, I'll do whatever you guys tell me to do, and I'm not going to stick my neck out and say this is the right thing, or I'm willing to stake my career, or, you know, back me on this is a risk. But what happens is that you go around in a circle and a circle, and there's nothing done.
Yeah.
And you need somebody to do more than that, I think, in both of those cases.
Yeah. What's interesting in both, we mentioned the city and the school, is how do you then explain so far almost total lack of candidates running for the 3 council seats or for the 2 school board seats? And the incumbents in both cases, 3 for the council and 2 for the school board, have refiled. They more than likely at this point are going to win re-election. There are no challengers. A terrible job at the school board, but the 2 incumbents are going to get re-elected. I don't know what that says.
Well, I don't know what it says either. I mean, if you look at the election from this past year, you have Karen Bowen and Dan Becker both getting reelected, and as we've or getting elected, as we've talked about before, what does that say? Because their opinions and views are so diametrically opposed.
Right,
It is they are as equally
Almost,
split as the rest of this community is. And I don't know what it says about the community, other than that we've got one half that wants one thing, and we've got another half that wants another. And we've seen that at the city council level. We've seen that with our mayoral race. Everybody is pretty evenly split.
You see it the whole country.
Yeah.
Very close. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at least there you can get candidates to run.
That's true. Too many. No, I don't.
That's true.
Yeah.
Any other disappointments?
Well, I had Justice Ziegler too, but we already covered that. But I think her misconduct is a disappointment at that level in state government.
Well, I have a disappointment too, and it's one of our counselors in particular, and I know you probably are disappointed with this. I've been disappointed this past year by Paul Esslinger. For a number of years, I thought he did a very fine job as a counselor. Lately, he just seems to be back and forth. He seems to be the epitome of hypocrisy in some respects. Now, in your neighborhood, he brought forward, and he's not the only one to blame for the sidewalks passing. That is true. It passed by, what was the final vote? 4-3 or was it 5-2?
5-2 in the first round.
Yeah, and then it became 4-3, I guess. So, but nonetheless, he is the one who sponsored those sidewalks and brought that issue forward, all under the guise of safety, when there's never been any incident of any kind in your neighborhood. And yet, by the same token, a few months later, when the subject of roundabouts at Jackson and Murdoch come up, Esslinger says that he had gotten traffic data for 3 years. There were 29,000 cars a day that passed through that intersection. He multiplied that out. He did a lot of math, and he said that therefore he didn't see that the 30 accidents that occurred during those years, he said, relatively speaking, he didn't feel that qualified as an unsafe intersection. And he wasn't in favor of the roundabout. And yet, not one accident in your neighborhood, but got to have sidewalks there. I find that hypocritical.
Yeah, I think the whole sidewalk thing has been thrashed over. So,
and we're probably going to get to that in another category.
Yeah, I have another category.
But there was one other thing, about the Esslinger situation. He turns in a bill for his legal fees to the city's insurance company for them to pay over the whole Dick Wolink situation, and Jackson Kinney, wanting him fired and this kind of thing. And yet, and that bill was what, $1,700, I think, and some change or whatever. And now we read in today's paper that he is still on this kick of wanting city employees no longer to be reimbursed mileage by the city, but rather force them to turn it into the federal government, filing it on their income tax returns. And, so we're going to try and save $29,000 a year here from the mileage that these people are getting reimbursed, but we don't care if we spend $1,700 here on my legal fees. And it just seems hypocritical. And and by the way, as we were talking about before the camera started rolling, just because you can perhaps file these deductions on your income tax return doesn't mean that A, you're going to get them back in full, and B, you have to be able to qualify in order to file an itemized return And the only way that you can claim your mileage is if you do itemize. So I don't see that as going anywhere, but it's just one more little thing about hypocrisy that I think is a disappointment, because I didn't see him that way in the beginning.
Yeah, I think disappointment can extend to much of the council.
Yes.
And I think the city manager situation is an excellent example. I mean, the council had control over Dick Wolank, and Dick Wolank behaved the way the council directed him to do. Okay, now if you've come to the end of your rope and you say, this guy just isn't the right guy, we need somebody else, well, why don't you think through the process of what you're going to do, what a replacement is going to cost you in terms of time and money, and instead of you force him out, then you say we're going to have a search for an interim. Oh no, we're not. Oh, now we're going to have a search for, but we don't really know, and there's not going to be a referendum now, but that doesn't mean that that's not going to change somewhere in the future. So you have all of these complicating factors that it doesn't look like anybody kind of thought through this whole process. And as I've argued all along, if you didn't like him, you could have just waited for his contract to run out in a year or whatever it was going to be, and take that time to figure out what you wanted to replace him with, and you just sort of have a smooth transition instead of paying 6 figures plus to have him walk away.
Yeah. Well, I too feel disappointment with a large degree of the council, but I'm not sure that started with this current council. I think my disappointment goes back to past councils for not setting goals for the city manager, for not making him be more of a leader, for not making him be the leader that evidently they wanted him to be, but didn't give him the goals and I guess the ability to be that leader. Kind of hypocrisy there all the way around. And the current council has only been seated since April, but yeah, they've not always made the best decisions either. So
I think they treated personnel in this case as something they would treat every second Tuesday for a month at a meeting, and then they thought it would be easy on them because they approach, they're part-time people,
right?
And they don't have any continuity with, well, just that meeting where they tried to write that job description, that was agony.
Yeah.
I mean, truly. I mean, they didn't know where, and here they have a human resource person that could have, helped them, and oh no, they're going to do it.
Right.
And it was terrible. I mean, and I think Tony said that it was probably his least finest hour because it was frustrating for everybody. I mean, they can't write, 7 of them write a job description, pick the times that they're going to be there. Well, I can't be there at this time. I can't be, it was not a good.
it's the Keystone Cops.
Yeah, Keystone Cops. Yeah.
So
So I think they viewed personnel as part-time, and as a result, they didn't do very well.
One of the other disappointments that I have is something you touched on earlier, Miles, as a top news item of the year, and that's the increase in crime. I mean, 29 as of this taping, robberies in the city, both robberies of stores and strong-arm robberies of individuals. And and then you factor on top of that all the other crime, the attempts at abductions, the sexual assaults, the domestic violence increases and things like that. And it's just, we are still, I think, by comparison, a very safe community. But for someone like me, or for you guys who have lived here for a long time, I'm a native of here, but it's really disheartening to see this kind of thing happen to a city that you have always known and called home. And it still is better than other communities maybe, but it's still sad to see.
Yeah, and I don't see a response. I don't see people, aside from a law enforcement response, and I don't think that that's going to be a complete solution. And there's kind of an interesting structural mismatch as well. If you think that the problems that we're talking about are in the city of Oshkosh, and I think that we would agree that aside from arresting the individual perpetrator, these are deeper social economic problems. Well, the city doesn't really provide social services. The county does. And you were talking before, the economic development efforts are just in disarray, and that's sort of a mixture of private, public, different levels of government. And so I think until people really focus on this and say, this is a symptom of much deeper problems that we've got to get serious about, I think we're just going to see this get worse.
Yeah.
And who is there in the city that would do that?
Yeah.
We're all silent at this table, so I guess that's the answer.
Yeah.
We don't know who that might be.
Yeah.
I think you have to have a leader,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that could raise these things. And I guess I'm thinking full-time mayor, but we can talk more about that later. But
Mhm.
you know, I think there's a void,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes around all of these things we've talked about.
Sure, sure.
Yep. Okay.
Major upset for 2007. You know, I think that there were a few, but the one that jumps out in my mind happened at the local council level, and that was Meredith Shireman's not being reelected. I think a lot of people maybe sensed that that was going to happen, but I think that for many others, including probably her, that was a major upset. And even though you're running at large, I think it's safe to say she was upset by Jess King. You know, at least I feel comfortable in saying that. And, you know, and by the way, I think Jess King has, you know, I don't always agree with her votes, but this is a hardworking woman. She has been hardworking since the day, since even before she took that oath of office, but certainly since the day that she took it and beyond. I think from that standpoint, she has done a wonderful job on the council. She's in there pitching, and my God, she's done more in 8 months on the council than some people did, I think, in years on the council.
They seem to depend on her more, too, to give her extra assignments. Like she's going to be on the search committee to, you know, look at which company that might go after and look for the new city manager.
Right, right.
Yeah. Why do you think Sharman got beat? You said Jess King, but are there any, what? Why
Well,
do you think?
I think that people were just genuinely disappointed. You know, she came out there saying she was going to do her homework, and I didn't see her ever asking tough questions.
No.
I never saw her asking tough questions. And, you know, I think that she would say that she asks questions behind the scenes. Well, that's all fine and well, but as I've maintained for years, if you run a campaign saying you're going to ask tough questions and no one ever sees you asking questions, then in the eyes of the public, you're not asking questions. You know, so ask, you know, get, like in law, they say never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. Ask your questions behind the scenes if you want to, but then ask them on camera so people can actually see you asking questions. Otherwise, like I said, you're not asking anything as far as they're concerned.
The other thing that she said when she was elected initially was, you know, look, I work for a bank, I understand budgeting, you know, I'm going to really scrub the city's budget. And then there were times it was clear that she just didn't understand that the annual budgeting process of a government entity is different from the sort of monthly or quarterly budgeting that a business goes through. And she just didn't make that adjustment and wasn't really able to deliver on that promise that she was going to bring this fiscal expertise.
Well, and there was no, you know, real leadership there, I don't think. At some time or another, we have seen, I think, pretty much every council member bring forward some kind of action, whether it be in the form of a resolution or it be in the form of, you know, an ordinance change or something. And I don't recall in her 2 years up there, Mrs. Sharman ever bringing forward anything. And, you know, it just seems to me that we would have seen something being brought forward.
She ran first in the primary and first in the April election when she won. And
Won by a landslide.
Yes, and she was kind of the darling of Progress Oshkosh. And where is Progress Oshkosh now? You know, she was going to be the first of these new leaders that this organization was going to produce. And I don't know what happened.
Yeah, good question.
Well, and are they producing anyone in the background and behind the scenes for the April 2008 election? I mean, you know, I mean, I'm just not hearing any names at all for council.
Miles and I were talking beforehand that maybe Santa Claus will. You know, all these people went in and got these petitions off online, and they're going to snow City Hall with them.
Well, maybe so, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't either. I have one other upset for, and this is just, I guess, sort of be funny. I call it school district plans A, B, C, D, F, G.
Wasn't there an E
Have
in
I
there,
missed
though,
it?
too? I thought there was an option E.
All right,
or
have I missed
scenario
any?
E.
But, you know, golly, all of the people who worked on A that got beat, and B, and C, and D, and then have to go back to the drawing board because, you know, they didn't like it. I mean, those people worked hundreds of hours and they were all defeated. I would think that would be a major upset or disappointment to
Yeah,
those people.
yeah, I agree. I agree. Best one-liner.
Oh, I love one-liners, but I'm going to wait till last because I'm sure you guys have got good one-liners.
Actually, you know, this is one that tested my memory and continues to test
Okay.
it. I could not come up with one best liner
Okay.
for the year.
How about one bad best liner?
You know,
You can't do it.
no, not
Okay.
right now. I can't.
Okay. The one that I came up with, I struggled as well, is actually from my next door neighbor. And
Well, that's why I didn't know it.
and they're a couple who moved, I don't know, maybe a year ago, maybe slightly more than a year ago, to the community, take a job, you know, with one of the large local manufacturers, and she got caught up in all of this sidewalk stuff. And as you mentioned, the problem was that, you know, we heard that it was a safety issue. We heard that it was complaints from other community or other neighborhoods, that it was some nefarious tinkering with the city code. You know, there are all these different explanations, none of which anybody believed, I don't think, even the people who were putting them forward. And, you know, and my neighbors went down to the council and said, look, if safety is an issue, here are some other options, or, you know, you could do this, or, you know, you could do that. And, oh, by the way, we have this problem with the lack of a traffic light at Summit, you know, that's really dangerous, and, you know, maybe you could do something there, and then maybe we wouldn't have this heartburn. And, of course, all of that got thrown out. And so what my neighbor, Lynn Flatt, said was, what kind of place is this? And I think that that's a question that we need to ask ourselves. And
we've been trying to since we started the show.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I like
kind
that.
of place
I don't
is
think
this?
minor is good. I have three, and I like to collect these things. I don't want to pick on Meredith Sharman too much, but I thought Stu Rickman's comment about before the election was that she was in a perpetual state of bewilderment. Was just I love that. I mean, perpetual state of bewilderment. I wish I could write something like that. The second one is from Dennis Kavanaugh, who's a friend, and he walks his dogs by my house all the time, who's president of the school board. And if you know Dennis, he's very soft-spoken. And during, I don't know, the failure of A, B, C, or F or something, he said, "I'm so frustrated I could spit." and for him to say anything like that is. But my best one is from Shirley Broadbender Maddox, a retired member of the Common Council who appeared before the council to speak against Tony Palmieri's referendum to elect a full-time mayor. She said she didn't want a full-time mayor because she didn't want he or she to be a schmoozer. And I'm sitting in the back room and I said, you know, this is coming from Oshkosh's greatest schmoozer. I mean, that's all she did as a council member. And at the end of every council meeting, she'd get this she'd change her appearance and her posture, and she'd go through all of the things all the schmoozing that she had done in the last 2 weeks.
Right.
And then she gets up and says, but I don't want a mayor to be a schmoozer. And I just thought, wow.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Individual recognitions. You know, I can't really think of, you know, one necessarily that stands out, but I guess if I had to pick one, it's our acting city manager, John Fitzpatrick. You know, this guy, we had the pleasure of talking with him for an hour just a couple weeks ago, and he has stepped into a real snake den, and yet he manages to pull off this job every day and every 2 weeks in front of the council, in front of the cameras, with dignity and grace and true professionalism. You know, he does not talk down to this council. He's not afraid to chastise them when they need it, but he certainly is not afraid of praising them when there's something to give praise for. And you know, he's picked up the pieces with no extra money. He will be getting some extra money, it looks like now, but I mean, that certainly wasn't part of the equation before. And he's taken the ball and he's run with it, and I think he's just done an outstanding job, you know. And so I would like to give him recognition.
I agree. I wonder where he's been hiding.
Yeah, really.
Because, you know, we're talking about lack of leadership, but here's a department head who just sort of steps in during a tough budget session, and I don't think he's received much. I mean, everyone seems to be pleased with his leadership.
Yeah. It wasn't he also the point person on negotiating the union
Yes,
contracts?
Yes.
Yeah,
so-
yeah, he has been for years, I think.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So he would be my one choice, I guess, if I had to pick one.
Do you have any?
Yeah, one person I would mention would be Aaron Shearer from the Payne. Simply because, you know, when I came to Oshkosh 10 years ago, the Payne was just this building that you looked at, and he's really transformed it into a place that's sort of a magnet, you know, the Nutcracker thing that's going on there now, you know, and before it was just, you just looked at it, but now whenever I go by there are cars parked and people streaming in, and that's really, I think, a remarkable transformation.
Yeah.
I had a collective recognition. I wanted to compliment all of the public employees in the county. You know, they always take it in the shorts, and I you know, this near Christmas time, I think we ought to say thank you to city, county, and school and university public employees. I mean, they do a good job, and they're there all the time, and so that would be my kind of collective individual
And
recognition.
sometimes, and sometimes in the worst of conditions. I mean,
Yes.
you know, these plow drivers, you know, getting out there when none of us wants to be out there,
Yeah.
and they're out there. Yes, they're in a shielded environment in the cab of their
Exactly.
truck, but nonetheless, they have to get up early in the morning and get out there and plow these streets so that we can get to where we need to go. And yes, I know some people will say they're paid very well for that between salary and benefits, but nonetheless, I mean, I don't know too many of us who would want to get up at those ungodly hours, get out in the cold, start up a truck, and go driving up and down streets plowing.
Yep,
So,
I agree.
You're right.
Best listeners now. This is a tough category?
You skipped over freshman stars.
Oh, I did. Oh, I'm
did.
sorry. Yeah. Let's go with freshman stars.
Well, I had two,
Okay.
Gordon Hentz and Jessica King. I think that, you know, Gordon has, and again, I don't agree with every single thing that, you know, that he does either, but I think that he has stepped into shoes that were filled for many years by Greg Underheim, and I think that he has just, again, taken the ball and run with it very well. You know, he is not afraid to vote against a budget if he's not in favor of it, and we saw that. He did not vote for the cable advisory bill, or cable, whatever the, I mean, it had a different, a number of different names. I'm not sure what it's going by these days, but, you know, he voted against that. He's holding regular listening sessions, and I think that, you know, I think that goes to his credit.
I agree.
I think he's doing a very good job. And then Jess King is the other one, and again, she, you know, she has come out of nowhere and is really a very hard worker. She's learning a lot, and she's not afraid to get in there and get her hands dirty. And she wants to get them even dirtier, I guess, by running for state senate. But that's another conversation for another show. But those were my two as far as
I think those are
freshman
good
stars.
choices. Yeah. What do you got, Miles?
Those are names that occurred to me. I guess the only question I would have is whether they're really starring yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're both working hard. I think
Yeah.
they're, you know, changing direction from the people that they replaced, and I think there's potential, but I think we're still have to wait
Okay,
to see.
good point.
I added Fitzpatrick as freshman star
Right,
too,
I
because
would've had
but you
that.
already picked him, and I would add Tony Palmieri. I really think that both he and Jess King have brought an analytical aspect to the council that hasn't been there before, and I think they are proactive. Whether you agree with their proactive, and the rest of the council has become sort of reactive to them. You know, they'll say, "Well, I agree or disagree," but they are clearly, I think, out front. And on the budget, I don't know whether you watched. Clearly, those two spent more time on that budget than I think those other 5 council members total. I mean, they really did. They worked hard on it, and so I think that's an indication of
Well, I think the council as a whole, even though, you know, as you said, Miles, they're kind of floundering around here with this city manager thing. You know, the discussions that they have, I think, are something that we've not ever seen before, and that's a very refreshing change. So while they may not be stars, it's just nice to see that kind of dialogue going on. And, you know, we've even been seeing a little bit more of that from Dennis McHugh. You know, I think that whether people disagree or agree with the recovery center that was approved at last week's council meeting, you know, the comments that Mr. McHugh made, I think were right up there with, you know, that was probably one of his finer moments since he's been on the council in the last year and 8 months, because a lot of times he's sitting there looking rather befuddled as well.
Yes.
And he has really, in the last, at that last meeting, I thought he really kind of
Clearly.
stepped up.
Yeah, that was his
And-
finest council meeting, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, you know, whether you agree or
Right.
disagree with the recovery center, he at least seemed to have his wits about him, and
Yeah.
he wasn't afraid to speak up, and there were clearly
Yeah.
well articulated thoughts.
That's fine, but that's small beer. I mean,
Yeah.
this city
it
has
is.
real problems.
It is.
Well,
It's
it
true.
does, it does,
Yeah,
it does.
yeah. You're right.
Procrastinators?
I don't have any.
I've got the Board of Education for the school
Oh, yeah?
district.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you know, as we said, they've done nothing really. I mean, they've tried, but they're just spinning around in circles like a dog chasing its
But those
tail.
budget writers down in Madison.
Yeah, I have
Yep,
them
there's
coming
another
up
one.
here too.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
All right, I have my fun one coming
All
up.
right, go ahead.
Engineers of the Year. I have nominated council members Paul Lestinger and Tony Palmieri for their excavation of the Rivermill neighborhood to improve safety by building needed sidewalks. They are truly Oshkosh's Engineers of the Year.
I can't disagree with that. I'm sure, Miles, you probably wouldn't either, would you?
I expanded it out to the Trail Hugger 4
Okay, that's good.
to include the mayor,
Okay.
Frank Tower, and of course Dennis McHugh. For
They were the four that in the final
Right,
vote.
right.
Okay, I like that.
What about Listener of the Year?
I have two.
Go ahead.
I had Alex Hummel because I think his forms, he's got to have listened to more than almost anyone else in this city. And then the other one that keeps coming up is, you know, every time I look at the paper, the Oshkosh Community Foundation has contributed some other project. And I think Eileen Conley-Kiesler probably listens to as many people as Hummel
Yeah.
does and probably delivers more than space in the newspaper
Yeah.
after listening.
Yeah.
I mean, they're doing a remarkable job. And
Yeah. I think that's right, and that brings up a point, and it may be they should be engineers as well.
Yeah.
There's something that isn't quite an accomplishment, but is sort of setting the stage is the redesign, the renovation of the convention center,
Right.
and then the new owners of the Park Plaza and that whole proposal. I mean,
Right.
so it's not happened yet, but that's a very encouraging sign.
is.
I think that those
Yeah.
two things that may actually get.
And actually, you know, that's really maybe a little plus for economic development for coming, because it looks like those things are going to go. They are going. So, you know.
As far as listening goes, I don't know that they'd be considered Listeners of the Year, but I think, you know, credit needs to go to Gordon Hentz, to Brian Bain, and to Dan Becker from the school board, because whether people show up or not, whether they come out strong or not at all, you know, these three continue to hold their listening sessions on a regular basis, just as they said that they would during campaigns. And, you know, so often we beat up politicians and elected officials for, you know, not keeping their campaign promises. And yet here we've got three who, you know, no matter what kind of weather we have, they're out there holding these sessions if people do want to show up.
Here's my listener, and it's from a very unexpected corner, which is the Catholic Church. The listener of the year, I think, has to be Bishop David Zubik, because you may recall that this very beautiful church over on the east side, St. Mary's, was slated for closure. And in fact, he had a recommendation from a local group saying that in the reconfiguration of the Catholic parishes, this one, even though it's beautiful and historic, you know, it's too hard to heat, we should close it. And he heard a lot from parishioners and others saying, no, this is really a special place. And he came in and said, no, we're gonna keep that one open, and it's because of the things that I heard. I was surprised.
That's a very good point. I hadn't thought about that one. Anyone have the most outrageous for 2000?
Yeah, I have probably a 30-second one. And,
All right.
and Miles grabbed it early, but it clearly is the 2007 Wisconsin legislature. A, for not passing a needed biennial budget for months and months. The illegal transfer of $200 million from the Injured Patient and Families Compensation Fund to the general fund, leaving us with $892 million in the hole when we start next biennium budget, and maybe 1.1 billion if the rate on the fund is ruled unconstitutional. Bonding the state for 2.7 billion. Someday that bill will come due. And then, after doing all of this, just out of pure fiscal responsibility, they passed a 6.3% raise for all of the members of the legislature, going from 47,413 to 50,438. Add to that $88 a day for expenses if you don't live in Madison, the best health care and retirement plan taxpayers can offer in Wisconsin, and generous mileage to go anywhere in the state anytime. They're probably making about $100,000 a year as a member of the legislature, and I think that's really outrageous. And then they didn't change the presidential primary date either, although I'm tired of it. You know, when I was a young person, Wisconsin was always second or third in presidential primaries. I remember the Humphrey McCarthy back in '68. We're now ranked 36th. We're tied with Hawaii for presidential or primary caucus states. So I'm giving it full blast to the legislature.
All right.
I think they've done a really bad job.
Very quickly, did either of you have anything for the longest mile that we've traveled in '07?
Yeah, the opponents of the fishing pier in Miller's Bay. Again and again and again and again. That's a long mile.
Yeah, that is. I hadn't thought about that one.
I was trying to come up with something other
for
than
that
mile.
category, but yeah, that you're right. That did go on and on and on, and who knows? It's still May, but I think we've probably.
I think the pier
heard
is
the end of
coming.
it. Yeah.
The
coming.
only economic development in Oshkosh in early 2008 will be the Miller's Bay fishing pier.
Did you have anything for that one, Miles?
No, not really. No.
No, I didn't either. And let's see. I think that pretty much covers our categories, doesn't it?
Thank you for entertaining me.
Well.
I just like to
was
do
fun.
it. I just,
I enjoyed
something
this.
off the wall.
Well, yeah, it is nice to do, and thanks for bringing up the idea. It
You're
was,
welcome.
we try and make light of some of these
Sure.
things, and I think we've done that, and hopefully we haven't ruffled too many feathers,
Right.
but I'm sure that there's some out there that have gotten
course.
ruffled, you can't help but ruffle some. But there was one other kind of semi-outrageous thing I think that
Okay.
happened during the year, and that was Brian Bain's sort of ouster, if you will, from the discussions.
Leaving, yeah.
Because let's face it, they all at one time or another had made comments
Right.
for or against the city manager, and just because he had said something,
Right.
I don't think that should have precluded him from those discussions. So
It's always unclear to me who removed him other than Brian Bain.
yeah.
Not
So.
really clear.
Well, not really a category, but I think one bright spot in '07 was the fact that the Christmas box Angel of Hope finally found a resting place or a resting site close to the Creekview entrance of the Evergreen Retirement Community, and that statue, of course, had been the subject of a lot of controversy in the preceding year, and finally that issue has come to a rest, and the angel has found her resting space. So that's a good thing. And I guess just as the statue has found a peaceful resting place, we hope that you and yours will find some hope and some joy and peace in not just the coming holiday season, but the coming year as well. So from all of us here at this table and at Ion Oshkosh, peace and happy holidays and Merry Christmas to all of you at home. Take care.